The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And today we're going to continue our discussion on the book Lead with Prayer. Pastor Brett talked to us about chapter 1, and we are honored to have Pastor Bryanna in with us today to talk about chapter 2, entitled Leaders Train Their Soul. And at the top, this verse is given, Ephesians 6:18, pray with all kinds of prayers. So welcome in, Pastor Bryanna.
Thanks for having me today.
How's everything going with you?
Pretty good. How's everything going with you?
Pretty good. So as Pastor Rob continues to be on his sabbatical, which we noticed he's still watching.
Yes.
Because sometimes we use a message service called Slack to communicate certain things back and forth. And ever so often we're seeing him make little comments here and there. And we're just like, okay, you're probably listening right now, Pastor Rob.
Yep.
Take a break. It's okay. It's okay.
Not just any time, like at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
He'll just send like a quick message and we're like, go to bed.
We love you and we know you care.
Yeah.
All right. So that said, we are getting into chapter 2 of this book. And it's called Leaders Train Their Soul. And so kind of some of your initial impressions about the book. I talked a little bit with Brett about that, kind of like coming into this. Rob passed out the book and said, okay, this is what we're going to take a look at as staff. What were your initial thoughts?
Well, my first thought, I was like, oh no, I feel like I've got a homework assignment. Like, I'm like, am I going to forget to read? But it's been good. It's been really great.
There's going to be a quiz.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going to be that one person that, like, Rob's like, Bryanna, what did you learn? And I'm like, I forgot, but it's been good. I really have enjoyed this book. I mean, from the start, even just like the introduction, it was really convicting. And, if you read the book, or if you're listening, if you're reading it, you know that it kind of highlights different leaders, and they come from all different parts of the world that are just like prayer warriors. And you get to read about just different scenarios and stories. Like one that sticks out, I forget who they are or where they're at, but they are like serving in a war-torn country, and they talked about how they like literally walk through like there's like places where like there's bombings and things like that. So like, but it details their prayer lives and just like advice they give. And I like immediately was convicted like with my own prayer life, and just reading this has really shaped and changed how I view prayer, how I approach prayer, how much I'm praying. Especially a lot of these people that are in the book are praying for hours a day. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And so it's been really, really good to read, and it's helped me in my own prayer life. So,
yeah. And in the first chapter, it kind of started with the premise of a lot of people would jump to the conclusion that spending a lot of time in prayer is just a waste of time. There's so many things I've got to get done. I'm so busy in life. I've got to do all this stuff. And the argument is made like there could be no better waste of time, so to speak, than to actually spend time with the Father, the one that can actually help you with all the other so-called things that you have to get done.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as you were looking into the second chapter, did you have some particular insights you wanted to, I hope, because that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. I have a lot. These are my notes if anybody sees them. So I'll try to connect all these as much as possible.
That's great.
So the book kind of opens up. It's talking about there's a chaplain with the Miami Dolphins, and kind of the parallel of like, athletes are training their bodies. You don't expect a football player to go play, be a pro football player if he's not training, like that'd be like me just walking onto a football team and be like, hey, I'm ready to play. So, and it kind of, the parallels like with our souls, like we need to be training our souls in a sense of like, actually dedicating time to be in the presence of the Lord, dedicate time to reading our Bible and praying, and like almost as if an athlete would schedule their workouts or their training. And there's a quote in this book, I'm not sure what page it's on, but I wrote it down. It says, so John Mark, who I believe he has like a ministry. He's the one that wrote the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I think. He wrote a book and has a ministry. They talk about him, but he says that following Jesus has to make it on your schedule, or the odds are it will not happen, or it will be sporadic at best. So basically what he's saying is like when you wake up in the morning or, go about your day, you really need to schedule time where you're going to be in prayer, you're going to be reading the word. And not only that, but schedule your other obligations around that. Like that should be the first priority, the first thing in your day, whether you do it first thing in the morning or in the afternoon, like that should be your number one thing on your list. And then, your meetings or your job or, whatever should go around that, which feels so like against what we usually do, like for most of us, our first thing is like, oh, I go to work. And then it's like, time with family or meals, whatever. But it's like what they're saying is, no, you should schedule prayer time. I mean, obviously work and things, that's at a set schedule, but you should be like, okay, I have work at this time, so I need to make sure I can fit prayer in before or after, or even in the middle, which we'll kind of get into later. But it talks about how it's good to have a rhythm of like praying morning, afternoon, and night. So I'll get into that later on. But just kind of this concept of training our souls, like it's really vital that we plan for it. And I can speak to that in my own life. The days that I don't schedule time in prayer, I'm not really prioritizing it, especially the night before. We pray as a staff, but I always try to have quiet time and read my Bible before I go into work. And I can always tell the night before what kind of morning it's going to be based on the night before. So it's like if I'm going to bed at 11 p.m., odds are I'm not going to be waking up at like 5:30 to read my Bible. So I always try to, make sure I'm going to bed early, I'm putting my phone away, things like that, so that I can, wake up. And even just thinking about it, like before bed, like mentally take note, like, okay, I'm setting my alarm. I'm going to wake up at 5:30, 6 a.m., whatever. I'm going to, read my Bible, or even plan ahead, like, this is what I'm going to pray for tomorrow morning, and make a list. And then this is where I'm going to be reading out, what I'm going to be reading out of, or this is my devotion that I'm going to read. Make sure my Bible's set on the table, like, kind of setting things up for success versus the days that I just go to bed at 11 and I just kind of wake up and I'm like, oh, time to get ready, and that happens. Like, I'm guilty of that. And like, trying to strive to make that time. And obviously we're not perfect, and this isn't to like shame people for making mistakes or oversleeping, or, it's hard. And like coming from, somebody that like, this is my job, like to lead people to Christ, like this, I still struggle with this sometimes. And so, kind of just give yourself grace. But the good news is like, even if you sleep past your alarm, or you don't wake up in time, or you just are having a rough morning, you don't have time, you still have the rest of the day. And I think that's always important to know, like, just because you miss your prayer time in the morning, that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to start again tomorrow. Like, you have all day to communicate with God. And which is why I think it's important to have that, morning, noon, and evening, so that you're in constant communication with God. And it's sort of like an open conversation. It's never ending. And so we'll kind of get into that more. But
well, as you were talking about it, the concept of training, this is not a new fad. Like all of a sudden the church is going through a new fad of like, let's be interested in prayer now and let's try this. This comes from Jesus. This comes from the example that he set. Yeah. I mean, really, if we could think of just from even a secular perspective of how much effect his earthly life has had on the world that we live in today.
Yep.
Arguably, there's not any one person that we could say that has had more effect on mankind than the appearance of Jesus.
Yep.
And take away all the religious issues, but just solely his presence. He has been such an influence on the rest of the world.
Yep.
And so it's like, we do get caught up in the busyness of our lives. We do get caught up in the things that we have to accomplish. But at the end of the day, if we take a look at here's the example that was set by somebody who's impacted the world more than anyone else ever has or ever will.
Yep.
And he was known for going off and praying. As so much so that his closest followers were like, teach us how you do what you do.
Yeah.
We need to know. And I'm thinking of Matthew 6 when it says, when you pray, when you fast, when you give, those are all like disciplines that he's encouraging us to train yourself.
Yep.
People will share sometimes like, I want to lose weight. Well, wanting to lose weight, sure, that's the first step.
Yeah.
But unless you ever do anything about it, you're never going to lose that weight.
Exactly.
If you don't exercise, if you don't change your eating habits. And so I think a lot of people in their lives, like, I want to have a closer relationship with God, but you have to move past just that desire.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to move to the point of like, how do I train
Yep.
for that to happen? So I know you have a long list of notes there. What's another insight that you have to share for us?
Yeah, well, kind of just going off of what you said, something that I tell our students a lot when it comes to kind of giving them a picture of their walk with the Lord and like a relationship, when you have a friendship, like think of like somebody that is your best friend or your spouse or, whoever. Imagine if you like just never talk to them. Like, are they a friend? It's like, are you really in a close relationship if you're not communicating? And I think we shared this one time during our prayer time or when we were discussing the book, but especially when it comes to talking to God throughout the day, like imagine if your spouse or, I don't even know. I think it mostly just applies to people that are married, but imagine you just like sending a text like, hey, love you. And then that's it. Like, that's the only thing you say.
Right, all day long.
Like, that's, pretty, that's not much of a marriage there at that point.
Or even worse, you don't say that. You just say, I need milk.
Yeah, exactly. Cook dinner.
And expect him to bring it home.
Right.
Because so many times that's what our prayers turn into. I need this.
Exactly.
I need this. And that is the level of communication that we have many times.
Yeah. So that was just another side thing. But kind of continuing on, talking about Jesus, in the book, it talks about drawing from the well. So it kind of explains how we as Christians have learned to pray fast. And in essence, like it is praying fast. Like when you're, I don't know, in the car, you're like, hey, God, like, please keep me safe. And that's it. Like just a quick one-liner, like, or somebody asks you to pray for them and then you just say a quick prayer. And in essence, you are praying fast. Like you're not taking time to like be sensitive to the Spirit and sit and, but it goes on and shares that, we do need to prioritize times when we're drawing from the well and we're praying slow. So we're like being in the presence of God and, reading the word and just like sitting and kind of meditating on him in his presence. Sort of like if you're hanging out with a friend or your spouse, like you're not constantly talking, but you're there with them. You're in the same space. Maybe you're enjoying an activity together, like watching a movie or whatever. You're still kind of in that space together versus just like boom, 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 talking, or like us, just talking to God and not really listening to what he has to say. But it explains that we are essentially drawing from the well, like for fast praying, like those moments when we are in the presence of God, taking our time, really like listening and just meditating on his presence. that's kind of like where that growth and that intimacy comes from, so that when we are in those moments of fast praying, we're kind of drawing from that place of the well. And that's really where we're filled up, or in those moments. So
yeah, it's not saying there's anything wrong with praying fast.
Right.
Sometimes we say a quick prayer when we're asking for a blessing at a meal, or like you said, a car cuts you off and you're not saying it in a bad way. You're literally saying, Jesus, help,
Yeah.
And those are good things, because that means that we feel comfortable to be able to call out to him instantaneously. But like you said, if that's the extent of our prayer life, then it's pretty shallow.
Yeah.
And this gives us a chance to get deeper in our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, and it gives an example of Jesus when he was like fast praying. So it's when he raised Lazarus from the dead. So he had already spent an extensive amount of time being in the presence of God and in deep prayer, so that when he went to Lazarus' tomb, he prayed, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. John 11:41, like that's it. And then he beckoned him, and then Lazarus walked out. So in that moment, you'd probably think Jesus would be on his hands and knees, like praying for an hour. No, he's like, thank you that you heard me. All right, come on out, Lazarus. And so he, showed examples of this, but this was after spending hours and a long time with the Lord. So it is important that we, like you said, we're not just only praying fast prayers. And there's been seasons of my life where I can tell a big difference, where it could just be a few days where maybe I've missed my time like with the Lord and I've just prayed fast prayers, and I could just feel kind of empty, like it's really shallow. But the times that I took time to be with the Lord that day, and then I pray a fast prayer in the afternoon, like I feel the difference between the two. And so but kind of continuing on, it shares that it's entitled From Habit to Identity, and it talks about David and how he went from someone who occasionally prays to a man of prayer, and how his prayers and like praying regularly and his habits ended up shaping his identity. And so kind of encouraging us all that like we should become people of prayer, not just people who pray. And so that was really convicting for me, and just in my own life and how I view prayer, and encouraging. So hopefully that's encouraging for you all too. So
yeah, it is a matter of training, and it's a matter of, first of all, starting off with that desire, just like we were talking about with, whatever it's weight loss or exercise or whatever. Yeah, there has to be that desire, but then you have to take it that next step. So hopefully today, as you're listening, we appreciate you kind of joining in with us in this discussion. And we're going to go ahead and in the notes, we'll put a link to the book if you're interested in looking at that yourself, or if you have questions, you can email podcast@shepnaz.org. We also encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Check out everything that's going on at the church by going to shepnaz.org. For Pastor Bryanna, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.